Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Gran Turismo 7. It's time for my first money method of update 1.49. I know there's a lot of people out there who are complaining about the physics and saying that, oh, the PP ratings changed, the cars have got slower, but I would go on to say that the meta itself has just changed and actually overall the cars are now much faster. Again, it's all about finding the new fastest cars and I believe this is one of them straight out of the gate, the Subaru Impreza Rally Car, new with update 1.49. So the Impreza Rally Car is available in the legendary dealership. As you can see, this is a Group B type vehicle, which means it's mainly centered around off-road and rally racing. It has 1994cc, four-wheel drive, 299 brake horsepower. Trust me, that's going to shoot up. In terms of the weight, it's 1230 kilograms and it's turbocharged. From a price point perspective, this is a fairly cheap car at only 650,000 credits. It's not exactly going to break the bank, and by the time you've done one single half-an-hour run, you're going to make that money straight back. So let's get started with liveries, aero parts, tuning parts and all that good stuff. First of all, I want to give a massive shout out to EMI Tenon, who has this replica rally livery. I absolutely love this one, really does feel like the real deal from back in 1998, so definitely go ahead and give this one a check out. Using this livery will give you everything you need in terms of the bumper changes, wheels and all that good stuff. However, if you don't want this livery, I'll go ahead and show you exactly what I'm using. It's an 18-inch wheel, it's going to be a wide width and a wide offset. Next up is going to be the bumper parts. So over at the front we have the Type A rear bumper, and in terms of the side, this is once again going to be Type A. Nothing else can be changed on the Impreza, so you are good to go in terms of cosmetic parts. So I'm going to showcase two different builds. The first one I'm going to show you is called the LM spec. This is a high speed build and the one you're going to see gameplay of in this video. This is mainly for Le Mans to hit the high end top speeds. So we're going to use the racing mediums. In terms of body height, it's going to be 80 front and 80 at the rear. This is the minimum amount. You can adjust this if you want to. If you find that it's catching a bit too much for you, then feel free to just increase the body height slightly. Then we're going to change the anti-roll bar next. At the front, this is going to be 5, and then at the rear, this is going to be 8. Compression is going to be 40 for both. Super simple to change this one, just match them on both front and rear. It's the same with expansion, but at 50. Natural frequency at the front is going to be 3.00 and 3.15 at the rear. Camera angle at the front is going to be 1.5 and 2.0 at the rear. Finally, for the suspension, we're going to move into the toe angle. It's 0 at the front and 0.10 inwards at the rear. Then on the fully customizable differential, I have the initial torque set at 20, the acceleration sensitivity are down at 15. However, the braking sensitivity, instead of setting it to 5 like we used to, I recommend about 15. This is something that's reported with the new physics, is that the cars love to move around a lot under heavy braking and will sometimes just veer off into the barrier. I find about 15 is correct with this car, but again, it will still require you to be much lighter on the brakes and much more careful than in the previous physics. The car moving around under heavy braking is certainly an improvement in my opinion. It just adds to the realism of the overall feeling of GT7, and it certainly does seem to be intentional. So just bear that in mind, that you're going to have to change the way you approach braking in GT7. So let's move on to the vectoring center differential next. I have mine set at 50-50. This is comfortable for me. However, if you do want it to kick out the rear more, feel free to adjust. I then have the fully customizable racing transmission. I set this to about 310. This is the sweet spot so that it's still very quick and doesn't use too much fuel. Final drive is going to be 3.259. The sixth is going to be 0.774-348. Fifth is 0.905-289. Fourth is 1.067-245. Third is 1.335-196. Second is 1.795-146, and first is 2.741-95. feel free to pause if you need to. We do have the fully customizable ECU by default. We are not ballasting or limiting power. Downforce, because this is running at Le Mans, can be relatively low. We're aiming to hit high speeds rather than tackle the corners. This car will do both quite easily. 119 at the front and 220 at the rear. This for me gives us enough top speed and just enough grip to tackle the corners. Then we're going to move into the parts. So we have the high RPM turbocharger, anti-lag system set to strong. In terms of the handbrake, you can go ahead and change this to hydraulic if you really want to. In terms of the brake controller, this is definitely something you want to play around with. I have mine at -2. I find a lot of the cars, when it comes to dipping down the front, it's a lot more aggressive now. I recommend putting it towards the rear, and it does seem to kind of counteract that at least a bit. For me, -2 or -3 is my preference, but it may be different for you. So play around with that first, then you might find your own personal sweet spot. Nothing else needs changing, super simple this one. So this is the second tune I've got. This is my absolute grip build. The main reason for this, if I want to run any of the 700 pp events in the game, this one will be able to tackle the more complex, more twisty and tight tracks. So once again, it's all pretty much the same. However, I have increased the body height adjustment to 85 and 90. You do find that the tight and twisty tracks in the game are typically much more bumpy, so I do recommend just increasing that ride height a bit. So 85, 95 is my preference, but again, this will need to be changed depending on the track. The next change is actually going to be with the downforce, 137 at the front and 250 at the rear. Once again, just giving it a lot more rear end grip because it is more than likely needed. In terms of the gearing ratios, that is completely up to you what you want to do. I still keep mine around about 310. In terms of event difficulty, when it comes to doing the Le Mans grind, you may as well just put it on easy. You're aiming to get as much money as possible, and it does allow you to do the stop and wait method. That is completely unchanged. So of course this build is targeting the WTC 700 events. Now a lot of the WTC 700 events are pretty poor for grinding. However, if you want a solid build for Deep Forest, Brands Hatch, Raceway Laguna Seca, or Topless and Dragon Trail, then I fully recommend the grip build. However, for Red Bull Ring, Circuit de la Sarthe, the LM spec is much better there. Of course it is for Circuit de la Sarthe, it is an LM build, mainly built for that track. When it comes to Mount Panorama, however, both of these builds will work well there. The top of the mountain is great for the grip build, and of course the long straights is fantastic for the LM spec. However, the main grinding event you're going to want to use is the World Touring Car 700 at Circuit de la Sarthe or Le Mans. This is one of the highest paying events in the game. It's a 30-minute time limited event, but it's now possible to do constant sub 4-minute laps. So before we get into the strategy, I just want to talk about the build itself. Of course, with 1.49 we've got brand new physics. There's been a lot of complaints and kind of moaning about the changes, but this is the way it's always been. All it means is that the meta from the last physics update are now completely gone. The same thing happened in March 2023, and the same thing is happening here now. All it means is that the meta cars for grinding have changed once again. It's not a big deal. There'll be new builds coming out each and every single day that just get faster and faster over time. And I'm sure there'll be exploits in the new PP system. A lot of people are saying that the cars are now slower on the new physics. I honestly disagree. I would say they've actually got even faster. All it's a case of, a lot of those meta cars are just not going to work. So you'll need to look to different avenues to be able to find those fastest cars. The build you're seeing right here is capable of 200 miles per hour in fuel mix 6 and capable of lap times of Le Mans in the 3-minute 50 region, rather quite consistently. Okay, so let's move into the strategy of this vehicle. The first thing you want to do is set the fuel mix to 6. Don't worry too much, the car's not really going to lose any pace overall. Still capable of 200 miles per hour and still very capable of lapping Le Mans in around about a 3-minute 50 to 3-minute 55 in the dry. In terms of some other changes, you want to put your brake bias to either -2 or -3. That's my personal preference, but you may have your own. If you've already figured it out for yourself, go ahead and just run it at what you're comfortable with. In terms of the physics, a few things you need to be aware of. The first is that the fuel consumption, especially on the Subaru, seems much higher for a Group B than it was prior to the physics change. Next up is going to be the tyre life. It does seem that all of the tyres have taken a fair hit in terms of their durability. The mediums, for example, will now run at peak performance up until about lap 4. Anything after that, you're going to feel a serious drop off. So I do recommend kind of aiming for 3 to 4 laps each and every single stint. Another big change is with the braking. This seems to be across the board with almost all of the high performance, high powered cars. It's definitely the case for the Subaru as well. If you're overly aggressive upon braking, it's certainly going to move the car around a lot. One of the best ways to counteract this seems to be braking quite hard and sharp really quickly, just to bring that speed down gently, and then of course bring the brakes in over time to get yourself down to where you need to be to tackle each corner. This way it does seem to reduce that movement under brakes. Another thing is of course engine braking. This has taken a massive nerf. A lot of people did it prior to this update, but it certainly isn't as strong. Again, can cause the car to become extremely unstable now. When it comes to short shifting, that is certainly still a thing with this update. In terms of exiting corners, short shifting will allow you to maintain the maximum amount of possible traction. It will also help you conserve fuel. However, with how the tyre life is, it isn't really needed to conserve fuel. However, if you want to do it to maintain the maximum amount of grip, then short shifting is still the way to go. Once you get to lap 2 though, the strategy is going to change. So at this point you should have an idea of how much fuel you're going to run, where you're going to run to, and how the tyres are behaving and how fast they're wearing. You want to start monitoring the weather radar just to keep an eye out for any incoming rain. Again, Le Mans is completely variable. Sometimes you might get rain, sometimes you might not. It's highest from the second lap onwards, so begin to monitor it from that point. Just to note, there is a bug currently in game that is probably going to be patched out soon that actually allows you to drive on the racing dry compound of tyres in intermediate conditions quite easily. Even in heavy wets it is still doable. You will just need to bump some of the assists on to keep it stable, but currently in intermediate conditions you can go just as fast on the wets and intermediates as you can on the dries. So really there's no need to change unless it does get to that heavy wet condition. So with the increased tyre wear and fuel, I was made to pit at the end of lap 3. So at this point I'm going to box in for another set of dries. If it's raining at this point and it's starting to get heavy wet, feel free to go onto the heavy wets or intermediates, whatever you want to do. However, again, if it's intermediate, don't worry too much. You can do it on the racing dry compounds. So I'm going to go for another set of mediums at this point. I'm also going to fill the car to full and go for another 3 laps. So all I'll need to do is just put the tyres on, fill the car to full, exit the pit lane, and away we go. So let's move on a little bit further into the race. It came to lap 6 and we were finally in intermediate conditions for the majority of the 5th and 6th lap. So at this point, again, it is getting to the point where the racing dry compound should be skidding all over the place. At least on the older physics, it would have been that way, but just not the case with these new physics, at least until it gets patched out. So the end of lap 6, I still have plenty of time to do another lap. I could have stopped and waited, but I'm actually not going to. So end of lap 6, I'm going to box in once again because it's every 3 laps. I'm then going to fill the car to full once again, put another set of racing mediums on, and at this point I'm going to boost the engine up to the maximum. Now typically you'll only get a lap and a half out in fuel mix 1, so just be aware of that you will need to balance it. If I'd have gone to the end of lap 7 and stopped and waited, I could have just ran fuel mix 1. However, I still had a minute left once I crossed the line, so I thought, well, why not? Let's just go and do an 8th lap. The plus point of the stop and wait method is it just allows you to creep over the line as soon as it ticks over to 30 minutes completed. However, I just wanted to finish up the 8th lap, which is exactly what I did. So there we go, up across the line, and that is the event done and dusted. Let's head over to the timings. Okay, so without the stop and wait method, I completed the event in 32 minutes, 57 seconds, 0.960, completing 8 entire laps. My fastest lap was a mixture of fuel mix 1 and fuel mix 6, which ended up being a 3 minute 52.738. As always, the payout for this one with that clean race bonus is 825,000 credits. Again, just be careful of yellow flags if you see one, if not, you're all good. So there we go, that is the first money method of update 1.49 and the brand new physics engine. These will build up over time. I'm sure there's some very quick cars out there, and I'm pretty sure the Subaru won't be the only one. I'll be testing out a bunch with the new cars in terms of money methods and some of the old builds as well, so that hopefully in another year's time we'll have a nice bunch of vehicles ready to go and grind the credits. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. A big thank you to all of my channel members. If you do want to join, it genuinely really does help me out between uploads. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day or night wherever you may be. Take care guys. Peace.